Hey everyone, I found this particular article representative of exactly how out of touch the elites are in this country. The sheer level of ignorance, or maybe it's just an unwillingness to accept the fact that these are the people that are speaking from a position of that form of elitism. Not only does it seem to escape them as far as the irony of it all, but it is a blatant and classic example of projection. That is one of the true great divides in not just this country, but most of the countries in the Western world these days, is the very real and undeniable fact that, I don't know what you want to call them, elites, central planners, social engineers or manipulators, or those who feel that their intellect and their ability to figure out what's best for you is so much superior in so many ways that it's your problem. You're the one who's at fault for not following their direction or their orders. How dare you try to live independently or see things through a different lens or a different perspective and push back against their political orthodoxy, their ideology, or their self-perceived moral authority. Headline of the Star, this is an opinion piece, Why Canadians Need to Wake Up About Populism. This is being contributed by Frank Graves and Michael Walpe, special to the Star, July 10th, 2019. In C.S. Lewis's fantasy novels, The Chronicles of Narnia, a bear is mortally wounded defending the Narnians against enslavement to a false religion by Calormene soldiers. Before dying, the bear utters his last words, considered by some the most touching speech of the series. He says, "I don't understand." Meaning, whatever is happening, he doesn't get it. The words are an appropriate meme for how the lion's share of Canada's media and much of the country's institutional elites are dealing with populism, the most important force currently reshaping our political and socio-economic environment, as well as disrupting advanced democracies throughout the Western world. They don't understand. They don't get it. They have embraced the notion that Canada is somehow immune to what's happening in Europe and America. Although the force of populism will be a significant presence in the forthcoming federal election, and in many respects, Canada is moving in lockstep with the United States towards a class war and a vision war. Populism in Canada has been masked by a paucity of research and thinking. It has been belittled, dismissed, with most expert opinion falling into two categories, patronizing and sneering. So keep that in mind, folks. Patronizing and sneering is how these two gentlemen are suggesting their elitist counterparts are responding to the so-called populism that's being referenced in this article. And while I'll definitely agree with that point, this article is going to bear the fruit and evidence that they are doing the exact same thing. It has been viewed as the problem all on its own, with little thought given to what has caused it or what can be done to encourage it to go away. In Britain and the US, the media and intellectual cohorts were largely caught napping by its molten eruption in the Brexit referendum, the presidential election of Donald Trump, and the alt-right shifts in much of continental Europe. You'd think that what has happened there should be a clue for us here. But no, we are Canada, the Narnia bear, believing that somehow we are staying apart from the rest of the world. Well, almost. Federal Conservative Party strategists, in fact, have got what's going on as far back as 2015, when former Conservative leadership candidate Kelly Leach and her campaign advisor Nick Kovalis talked about vetting immigrants for Canadian values. And less than 4 months away from an election, the party is a magnet for populists and leading in the polls. This essay's purpose is to define what kind of populism has come galloping into our midst, to identify its ingredients and what has created them, to shine light on the dark mischief they are causing, and to explore how possibly to deal with the phenomenon. So as you get from this article so far, these two people are basically finger wagging at their fellow elitists in this country or in other countries in the Western world that are once again both patronizing and sneering towards those who support the appeal of populism. Any kind of populism has two key ingredients. The idea that there is a corrupt, power-holding elite of which the people, the public, are deeply suspicious, and the belief that power should be removed from the domain of the elite and restored to the people, which is why Ontario Premier Doug Ford speaks on television with a placard across his tummy reading, "For the people." We label the particular variant of populism that the advanced democracies of the West are encountering as authoritarian populism, or preferably ordered populism. The two terms are interchangeable. They capture the same constellation of outlooks, but the first has a history. It's authoritarian populism, right? The people who are supporting populists, or even the populist leaders, are people that don't have any power. They don't have any entrenched bureaucratic power or establishment power. That is, even Trump. Look at the guy. The guy has no established or entrenched political clout within the connected or the ruling class. They're all against the guy. They're all the ones that are pushing back against him. The deep state, the bureaucracy. So how are these populist leaders authoritarian in any way? And where are the actual examples of that? You're not going to read them in this article, I'll tell you that, because they got nothing to offer. Actually, before I continue to read the rest of this article, I just want to go down to the bottom of this article and tell you, because there's a little caption at the bottom that explains who these two contributors are that are putting out this kind of rhetoric. And let me just say, it's a clear and concise, actual perfect example of the kind of projection I was talking about earlier. These are the true elitists. These people are a direct representation of that kind of elitism that they're referencing in this article. No wonder they feel like they're in a position to talk about it or have an informed opinion, because they're basically talking about themselves. Frank Graves is the president of Ottawa-based Ecos Research Associates and an honorary fellow of the University of Calgary's School of Public Policy. So this is Ecos Research, that polling institution that seeks to be your thought leaders or opinion makers in terms of how you should perceive politics, or who you should support, or which party is best representative of Canadian. I mean, it's Ottawa-based, for crying out loud. The belly of the beast. And then you got Michael Valpy, is a senior fellow of Massey College and a senior fellow in public policy at University of Toronto's Monk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. Sounds like a very elitist position. And once again, representative of these universities or these institutions that are contributing to not just dumbing down the populace, but greatly misinforming them as well. And not just misinformation, I'll add, ideologically driven information and rhetoric. Authoritarian populism was a label created by post-Second World War German socialist scientists seeking to understand how one of the most civilized societies on earth could have descended into the horrors of fascism and the Holocaust. Their conclusion was that fearful Depression-era Germans saw order in the face of an exaggerated sense of external threat and internal threat from others who were among them, like Jews, and economic hopelessness, and embraced obedience and respect for strong authoritarian regimes to lead them into green pastures. First of all, folks, I've got lots of videos in the past, and hey, if you don't want to watch my videos, then you can look at other videos or articles or source of information, or documentaries for that matter. Like I say, you take that onus, you take that responsibility on yourself to find out what you need to verify and lend credibility and validation to what I'm saying. And let me tell you, these fascists, these authoritarian regimes, whether you're talking about Hitler, Mussolini, Mao, Stalin, or Lenin, now they had different variances, of course. Some were more global in scope, while others were more representative of the nation state. But all of them were collectivist authoritarian regimes. All of them represented a move towards socialism or communism or authoritarian collectivism. None of the people that are out there standing for so-called populism today, such as Maxime Bernier in Canada, are promoting any form of authoritarian collectivism. Matter of fact, the exact opposite is the truth and a representative reality when you're talking about Maxime Bernier and the PPC in particular. And Maxime has said so himself on many occasions. His party and his policy stands for indirect representation of the individual and the promotion of individual rights, freedoms, and liberties. Fairness, respect, individual freedom, and personal responsibility. Does that sound like authoritarian populism? No. Adopting a live, let live mentality is the exact opposite of authoritarianism. Like I say, folks, these people are projecting. Using the term connected to Nazism and fascism obviously presents problems today. Ordered populism is a much less charged label. The search for order in response to what is seen as chaos and threat, the persisting menace of another 9/11, the perception that economic and social progress has ended and that globalization has undermined the status quo of some golden past. You'll see that what the Germans' social socialists uncovered 75 years ago pretty much fits with today. Ordered populism, the kind overtaking Canada and the rest of the developed world, has 4 key conditions: a declining middle class, wage stagnation, and hyper-concentration of wealth at the very top of the system. Major shifts in social values which see more progressive values displacing traditional social conservative values which, in concert with the conditions listed above, produce a cultural backlash by those seeing themselves fallen victim to loss of identity and privilege. Wait a minute. That describes it so far, and I'll continue on, but so far that's very much describes those far leftists as well, right? They seem to be disenfranchised with the elites in this country and the elites in the Western world as well. The Antifa groups and these far left groups or these far left activists are pretty much railing against the same entrenched system as their far right counterparts that, once again, this article is trying to reference it. It's the far righters, right? It's those who are on the right side of that political spectrum that this whole article is pointing out in reference to. But once again, there's not going to be any mention of the fact that actually their counterparts on that far left side of the spectrum, Antifa groups or these extremist progressives, they're basically in line and on board with spewing the same rhetoric as it pertains to pushing back against the ruling class and the status quo. The only difference is both sides of those political camps have a different idea in how they want to change the status quo or change the current system to better suit their own ilk or their kind, or what they perceive as their kind. Whereas, like I say, libertarians such as myself, I'm not playing either side and I'm not playing games by any stretch of the imagination. I take this kind of stuff very serious, which is why, unlike these two gentlemen or these two contributors, I'm going to point out that populism is accepted and embraced by people from all areas and both sides of the political spectrum. The only real difference, the only true divergence, is how they want the actual outcome to be generated and how that all plays out. A growing sense of external threat expressed in a rise in the belief that a world has become overwhelmingly more dangerous, as well as a rise in the perception that the country and its public institutions are moving in the wrong direction. Declining trust in public institutions, plus a rise in ideological polarization. All those conditions are present in Canada. They predominate among less educated males. Here we go, folks. Here's where the insults really start to dig in. And once again, shows a clear and concise example of just how out of touch these elitists are. Because they believe just because you've been indoctrinated in a public education or indoctrination institution, which is what I would consider them these days, is somehow, if you're indoctrinated into that, then you're educated. But if you're not, I guess you're stupid. Well, you know what? The flip side was said basically about people who went to church or who were followers of cults or religions in the past. Well, I guess if you went to the Catholic Church, I guess you were probably more adapted and informed in terms of the Catholic religion, right? But the people that didn't go to Catholic Church didn't mean they were stupid or uneducated. It just means they weren't indoctrinated into believing in Catholicism. Once again, folks, using the term education in this example, or in an article such as this, is to trick your mind into thinking that if you've gone to a public indoctrination or education institution, that places you as superior, not just in intellect, but apparently even in morality, as compared to your peers who haven't. They look as if they've suddenly appeared by magic, but in reality, they have roots dating back 20, 30, and 40 years. Since the beginning of the century, less than 2 decades ago, the percentage of adult Canadians self-identifying as middle class has declined from around 70% to about 50%. Since 1980, the bottom 90% of working-age Canadians have made no real income gains, while the earnings of the top 0.1% have increased on average by 500%. Sounds like actual real-world examples or statistics that would lead to the rise of populism, right? Self-defined middle class is strongly linked to income, but even more strongly linked to health and quality of life. Clearly, such a profound hollowing out of the middle class has registered dramatic impacts not only on economic outlook, but also on basic health and happiness in upper North America. Eccles has found that by a margin of more than 2 to 1, Canadians believe that if present trends with inequality at the top continues, then the country will witness violent class conflicts. In 1996, University of Toronto political scientist Neil Naveet published The Decline of Deference, Canadian Value Change in Cross-National Perspective, a seminal and unexpected account of how Canadians were becoming an undeferential lot, an increasingly sophisticated, cosmopolitan, well-educated, and politically engaged society unwilling to be pushed around by hierarchical authority and embracing protection of the environment as a defining idea of fundamental moral behavior. The antithesis of authoritarianism, right? So now they're going to go, this is the divide, right? Environmentalists are your moral superiors. Everyone else, they're just evil, dumbed down, and ignorant, well, predominantly white males or conservatives, right? But value surveys carried out at the same time by Eccles Research revealed a profound gulf between the attitudes of best educated Canadians and those of their less educated fellow citizens on a wide range of issues, including the environment. A gulf that very much has widened ever since. In other words, not all of us embrace this cool cosmopolitan outlook, and Eccles today is finding a growing cultural backlash against it by Canada's ordered populist cohorts. So it's cool if you're one of those cosmopolitan elitist environmentalists, right? Keep that in mind, Canada, because that's the message that's being sent in this article. You might ask yourself why it took so long. In 1999, only 3 years after Nevitt's book appeared, a Senate Committee on Social Cohesion in Canada, chaired by Conservative Lowell Murray, reported that the country had entered a period of economic, social, and political turbulence that possessed severe challenges. Economic inequality is increasing. Skills that were valuable yesterday are suddenly obsolete. It is more difficult for people with limited skills to find good jobs, but opportunities open up for great increase in wealth for those who are able to exploit new technologies and emerging markets. Actually, no, that's more nonsense from these people, because listen, robots and automation, nobody has replaced blue-collar work. Those in the construction field, or the so-called deplorables, or the less educated, as these elitists suggest, right? So no, those are not the people, and actually those are positions that actually well-paying jobs, right? So no, those are not the people predominantly, right? You got a lot of retail workers. Matter of fact, you got a lot of women, a lot of university students that you can include in those people who are seeing just how diverging and different the outcomes are for people who are part of the ruling or connected class and those who aren't. Populism is populism for a reason, folks. And it doesn't come from one side of the political aisle, as it's being suggested here in this article. It comes from people who recognize and not just perceive, but see with their own real eyes, which is even being acknowledged in this article, the massive divergence in how the ruling class or the ruling establishment or those who are connected to it are making out like bandits, both socially and economically, while the rest of the population have become basically chattel or the working poor or wage slaves in this country. That's what causes the rise of populism. Anyways, folks, I'll place a link to this article in the description of the video below. It's quite a long article, but I just wanted to point out at least a couple examples, but it gets worse as you go along. But yeah, these two people, these contributors to this article, to this submitted hit piece or opinion piece towards the working class or the working poor in this country, or the blue-collar white males that they seem to look down upon or loathe or have disdain for. Yes, these people are an exact representation, and that's why I said earlier on that they're just projecting. That's what the left, that's what these authoritarians do. I didn't quite realize it for a while. I just figured, because I'm the kind of person who likes to deal with people as individuals and perceive of people as an individual. But I have come to realize and learn that yes, the reason why they're constantly talking about authoritarianism and collectivism or identity politics or about the group is because that is what they're all about. They seek to deny the individual, because to them, an individual doesn't mean anything. Well, an individual that doesn't align with the collective or the group, well, they should be automatically sacrificed, or at the very least, tossed to the side in order to achieve their political or ideologically driven goals. So while they thought they were doing a decent job of pushing back against their counterparts or their fellow elitists, all they were really doing at the end of the day is showing that they're just the mirror image of their elitist counterparts, and very much all about looking down or using their so-called positions of authority or expertise to get more Canadian people on board with a line with them while foregoing their Canadian working class counterparts. Be wise, Canada. Don't fall for this nonsense. It's time to support each other, because the us versus them truly is the people, the masses, the average Canadian, against these elitists whose only true care and concern is micromanaging and dictating every area and aspect of your social and economic life. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.